Everyone, this is Ken Clank from Citywide Title. Welcome to our show, Eat and Drink Real Estate Podcast. I have our special guest here today, Nancy Abuali. Nancy, you're with Keller Williams Infinity.
Yes.
And you're also part of the Inclusion Group. Tell us a little bit about how you got into real estate, what makes it exciting, and what do you like to do most in this area?
I love everything about real estate. I would definitely say that I am excited about this area, familiar with this area. It definitely makes me a little bit good at my job. I'm born and raised a Chicagoan and kind of just always been interested in generally the real estate properties, and I love real estate.
Okay, and how long have you been practicing real estate?
So actively helping others buy and sell has been about 7 years now. In the real estate and property management in general, it's been 21 years. Yeah.
That's blackjack where I come from, so that's good luck, right? It's a winner.
721, absolutely.
There you go. You're winning with both of those.
Yeah.
Again, welcome to the show. A lot of the questions and information that we try to reach are generally the home buyers and home sellers. And thanks again for coming on the show and sharing your expertise.
Thank you for having me.
Certainly our pleasure. The big question a lot of home sellers have on their minds right now: should I sell my home right now, or should I wait?
Definitely a very good question. When people ask me that question, I actually had someone ask me just this past weekend. And when you ask that question, you're generally asking, how's the market? We always get that question, like, how is the market? And I want to make it clear that that is definitely not the only thing to consider when deciding whether to sell your home or not. Generally speaking, I mean, it's always a good time to sell your home, but there's a lot of factors to consider that are involved in it, right? I'm sure you're quite aware of that. And definitely probably the number one is market conditions. Market conditions, can dictate the amount you're going to sell it for. But rather than just that, your personal circumstances are probably the number one most important thing when considering if you're going to sell now or not. And to have a good agent on your side to discuss all of those factors with you is crucial. There's quite a few things that, we all know: interest rates, seasonality, a bunch of different things to consider when selling. But I think it's important to just have that guidance.
Okay. And when we look at people that are looking to sell and they've got to make those key decisions, and there's those decisions are made for people in many cases. If you're delinquent, because some people have fallen on hard times, many haven't, but that happens. You can have a divorce situation. There can be other attributes that really push them that way. But when we talk about current market conditions, what are the local market conditions, and what do sellers need to know about what's happening right now?
So 2025, remains a strong market for sure. So 2025, you could still consider it right now regarding and this is in the Chicagoland suburban area that I get heavily involved in, that I'm very well acclimated in and knowledgeable. So basically, it is still, as of now, a seller's market. A lot of people will tell you it is July 2025 right now, and a lot of people will tell you that they're seeing a shift. I'm seeing a shift, without a doubt. You could definitely see that. But statistically speaking, the metrics that they use to decide whether it's a buyer's market or seller's market, it's still showing a seller's market. About 2.3%, 2.3 months of timing on the market is what we're at right now. But in the same token, the medium home prices are still rising in this area, 7 to 7.5%. It's definitely things that are in the favor of the sellers, and we're still looking good. And I think the bottom line when someone asks, should I sell, how's the market, whatnot, is when I say depending on your personal circumstances, if you're going to buy, that's a big personal circumstance, because you sell high, you buy high in a lot of cases, right?
Mm-hmm. Kind of like a wash, if you will.
Right, exactly. You're not planning to buy, and you have time to wait for a little while, or you are going through a divorce, or there is other things to consider, then you need some real good guidance on that.
Mm-hmm. So right now, are you seeing more listings on the market? Is that number continue to increase? And is that a trend? If it does continue to increase, is that going to shift it more toward a buyer's market?
Um, Very good question. So, yes, as far as inventory, it is continuing to increase a little. You more specifically asked about listings. Um, there's different factors to consider. And as far as listings, um, the um, there's not a huge spike in the number of listings, but being on the market just a little bit longer obviously makes that inventory increase a little, which factors into the amount of months and different things that we talked about. In my world, I'm still seeing listings, so there's a
Hmm.
lot of things to consider when asking that question because it depends on the experience of the real estate agent. It depends on the connections and different things that they have and knowing what kind of circumstances your clients are going through.
Okay. Now, a lot of people when we have a lot of in a seller's market, what kind of contingencies are we running into in some of the offers, and what should sellers be aware of, and what's happening with the contract and these contingencies that often
Yeah.
pop up.
Yeah, I definitely got that question. I mean, people are much more knowledgeable with the age of the internet, the age of being tech savvy. You could look up a lot of that stuff yourself, right? And when you're having that conversation with any agent, a seasoned agent, a new agent, there's usually like maybe two contingencies that they always allude to that are the most popularly talked about, which are the home inspection contingency
Mm-hmm.
and maybe the financing contingency, right? Those are two that you kind of, it comes up a lot. But in reality, the benefits of having a knowledgeable and seasoned agents on your side is that you have to realize that there are other things that you need to be aware of in selling the biggest asset, of your life in a lot of cases. And there's other things like a title contingency. There's other things, the association. When you're buying any place that has associations, you have a certain number of days or whatnot to review those association docs. The truth of the matter is, when you're looking at a 13, 14-page contract, this is, why I have really good partners that I recommend to my clients as far as attorneys or, title companies or whatnot, because it's a lot of fine print, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's quite a few contingencies that you need to be aware of in the contract itself.
Agreed, agreed. And it's good to consult with attorneys and seasoned brokers like yourself to know how to manage and really navigate through some of those contingencies. And some of those
Absolutely.
are obviously contingencies like lending contingencies. You want to make certain you're able to get the money to the table, or we're not going to have a closing.
Right.
So that's always a popular one. One of the other ones I've seen, and it's kind of unique, is that at least now, and I think it's becoming more prevalent, is we see a lot of sellers, even homes that are in very good condition or newer homes, being put on the market as is.
Yes.
Can you explain to the audience what as is really means? And as a buyer, what do well, let's look at it from two perspectives. What does as is mean from a seller's perspective? And also, does as is mean from a buyer's perspective?
Yeah, I mean, perspective and perception are
Mm-hmm.
two very different things, right? So, when you're looking at it from a buyer's or a seller's perspective, it really does have two very distinct meanings, right? And depending again how your agent is guiding you, can also really affect how you're seeing that. So, as is in general is saying that you're taking the house and you can do an inspection in most cases, but you're not going to be requesting any repairs.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, it does mean as well that you're not stuck with it in an as is situation. You do have the option to do that inspection because that's another contingency, right? A
Mm-hmm.
whole separate contingency that says there's an inspection and potentially back out of that deal. So you don't have to be too afraid of it at the same token. Now, in this new 8.0 contract that we have, again, where we are right now, July 2025, a few months ago, we got that new contract that says as is, and then it says inspection with requests, inspection without requests, no inspection. So there's, because of this confusion, this question that you're asking me, there's so many other things that have been added to the pie now. But generally speaking, the plain and simple definition of as is you will not be asking for repairs, and the sellers will not be doing any remodeling, repairs, any kind of, the house
Concessions?
is as
Yeah,
is.
it's as is.
It's as is.
And what is one of the main motivators that you would think a seller would have to use the as is option?
Yeah, I mean, especially depending if it's a seller's market, then their main motivator is there's going to be people fighting over this home. And for them to say my house is being sold as is means that they don't have that extra expense. They're capitalizing on their funds, they're capitalizing on their sales price. They don't have the credits that go into it with fixing things. So, and, that is not a end all be all, because that buyer can essentially come back and either say, I'm done with this, I'm out, or, you know what, I know I said as is, but
Right.
maybe I didn't mean it.
A soft as is.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
And go the either way on you.
Right. So, that happens as well. Obviously, you don't want that, but it happens. So the seller just goes in, with the idea that take it or leave it type thing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Now, from a buyer's perspective, what kind of emotional response do you get when they say, "Well, this property," because as a listing agent, you're disclosing that, and the buyer's agent, the buyer, of course, is aware of this property is being sold as an as is. What kind of response do you see buyers come up with in their mind?
Generally, inexperienced buyers are fearful. They're absolutely scared of, why the heck are you saying this is as is? What is wrong with it?
Right.
If you have an agent that says to you, a lot of houses are being marked as is right now just because the seller doesn't want to go through this stuff. Let's take a look ourselves. We can do an inspection anyways, whatever the case may be. It kind of helps them feel a little bit more at ease. But to answer your question, with that initial response is usually a little bit of fear. They're scared of what they're getting into. And nowadays, they shouldn't be. Maybe 20 years ago, when you say as is, it can potentially mean that house is really not in a good condition.
Okay.
Doesn't mean that now for the most part.
And I think that's good that people do understand it, because that's kind of always been historically the perspective
Yeah.
of that as is means, whoa, what's wrong with it? I got to do a
Whoa.
thorough inspection, which you should do
Regardless.
and then make your final determinations, because not everyone can see through concrete and see what's underneath the home, or see major issues that may be there
Yeah.
or may not be there. But
Right.
either way, you want to have that confidence, and that's what the qualified state licensed inspector is going to provide that buyer. And we also see, I've seen the as is properties listed with inspection provided,
Yeah.
where they say, well, this as is means, but we also could mean whatever you think it means, but we also have an inspection that you can preliminarily take a look at it, and there is nothing wrong with this house. It means we're going to go negotiate up, or we're not going to negotiate at all.
Right.
In a lot of cases, I don't think a lot of people realize that.
Yeah.
There's
And
some
you
strategy
definitely
there.
need good people on your side to protect your decisions, whether on the buyer side or on the seller side, right? Because,
Mhm.
like you mentioned, the inspection, there may be a lot of things even the inspector can't see. The inspector can't necessarily see behind walls or whatnot. But if you have that property disclosure and you're specifically telling your clients that fill this out as honestly as possible, here's my job to direct you and guide you on what to do, and then you have the inspection and that information. Also, I've walked through thousands of houses. When I'm walking through that house, whether I'm representing the seller or the buyer, I see something, I see a little stain, I see a little crack. I'm going to ask that question. What is that all about? So it is like the most crucial thing to have a good team on your side.
Yeah, and that leads me to my next question. People need to make an important decision, whether they're buying or selling the home. And I think on the seller side, equally as important, if not more in many cases, is selecting the right agent. If you generically were to give us, or in your opinion, what are the key things, that boxes that need to be checked, that sellers should be looking for when picking the right real estate broker to represent them when selling their home?
Have you ever heard of the term loaded question, right?
Yes,
so,
I just asked that loaded question, but yes.
so there are, if you ask the general person out there what they're looking for, or even what's in their mind, price is like their number one, right? Their thought is, well, I'm going to pick based on, they might not say that out loud, but it might be in their mind a little bit, right? I'm going to, based on the least expensive agent out there, because they all do the same thing. That absolutely not true. Everybody is an individual. Everybody does the right thing. And I'm not saying I do not negotiate my rates. Absolutely. That is part of our job, right? Absolutely talk about rates, talk about what we do for you. More importantly is consider all of the other factors that are involved with what we talked about, the experience, right? Experience is important. Not necessarily they've been in the industry for 20 or 30 years. It is more, are they open to the knowledge and training? Have they been going through their continuing education? What kind of scenarios have they been in, right? So that is very important. I mean, experience can mean a lot of different things, but I've seen brand new agents who kick butt, because they have done that training. They're constantly learning. They're shadowing other agents. They're being put in those scenarios that are very important. So it is crucial when you're getting that education to consider some of it on local market knowledge, right? When I'm telling you some of those numbers that we talked about earlier, that it's important for you to keep updated on that, right? When you're having that conversation with the seller, I often say, again, a couple days ago, I met with a potential listing. Actually, now it is a listing, but I told him, hey, did you know that house across the street just closed 2 days ago for this amount? And that prompted a conversation. Why is that different? So really try to understand those local market conditions a little bit. And it's not just about the market analysis and whatnot. It's about you knowing what's going on in your area, in your neighborhood. But communication skills, likability, negotiation skills. I mean, there is a list of things I would be happy to outline it for everybody and I do when I'm having the conversation with my clients. But not only good negotiation skills, but confident negotiation skills, right? So
Mm-hmm.
every agent that you choose should have an abundance of confidence.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason for that is the number of people that you're dealing with, that you talk to on a daily basis, not just contract negotiations, but my team. I want to look like a rock star for my clients by having great attorneys and inspectors and contractors. I mean, contractors is a big thing. Secondly, I mean, will you be willing to roll up your sleeves and get dirty and go do what has to be done? It's not every agent's job or every agent's desire, but I've had plenty of clients, another one very recently, that says, I need to get rid of all of this stuff. I have the resources to give her contacts to get rid of that stuff. Her follow-up was, I don't have a lot of money though. So we need to figure this out. How are we going to work it out where she gets that done properly? So I went in there with a team of a couple of people, a couple of junk people, rolled up my sleeves and made sure all that junk was out of there.
Right.
So, those are the kind of things that you need to consider when choosing an agent. How invested are they in my destiny, in my success in
Mm-hmm.
getting this real estate transaction done?
Yeah.
So do you hear that when it?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
It picks up a little bit on the mic as well.
Okay. It's off. It's just, I don't know.
Do you want me to move it out of the room?
Yeah, that would be good.
Thanks, Joe.
Yeah.
Well, my next question, Nancy, is going to be, people have generally, like you said, one of the key things that they want is to know what can I sell my house for. And there's that price point when you first show up the house and you take a tour of it and you look at it. And then there's applying your expertise. and making the recommendations literally room by room. And I know as an experienced real estate broker, you're doing that so you can identify what this property needs, what it doesn't need. And I imagine you're putting together a pretty detailed list to let that home seller, these are the specific things you need to do to get this home ready before we even list it on market. Have people come and see it, because we want to do what? We want to sell it for the most amount of money in the least amount of time, right?
Right.
How do you handle getting that home, and how do you make the recommendations? Can you walk us through that process?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the number one most important thing is not to intimidate your clients. You walk into a home, I don't want to just spew out a list of things that
Mm-hmm.
they need to do, right? So it is much more important to kind of get to know them, get to know their situation and what their expectations are. And, maybe they said something like as is. Okay, well, as is, here's what you could potentially get. Otherwise, you do these few things, here's how much it goes up to. You do a kitchen remodel, here's what so we go through that process as least intimidating as possible, because you walk into a house and you tell them they need to spend 50 grand or a large amount of money to do something. Well, they need some data, they need some stats on how much is that going to increase my house, and do I really want to put that out there? How long is it going to take for my house to sell? And of course, none of it is an exact science because the market changes, but you need to be able to give them as close as possible of an estimation of not only amounts, but days sold and everything else that's involved. So, really, my process is I will have that general number before I even walk into the house. And this is how I differ, I think, from a lot of agents that they don't even want to do that. They don't want to give them any kind of estimation until they see things, well, the truth of the matter is we are knowledgeable enough to kind of say, this is what your area is selling for with this amount of square footage and this amount of bedrooms and bathrooms. So I will start with that. So this is your average. From here, I need to look around and either go up or down depending on what I see and what we discuss and how soon you need to sell. What is your personal circumstances? So my process is I don't know, the small, medium, large, and maybe supersize, right? Maybe small is not doing anything at all, as is, whatnot. A lot of cases, my clients might go with the medium, and I have no issues with that. Get a good house cleaning, declutter as much as possible, right? Just doing that bare minimum, hopefully patching a few things, painting a few things. You get into the large and the supersize, remodel this area, change the carpet, clean the carpet, do whatever. And when we come to those decisions of here's why you should do it, and again, you're taking on these big projects, keep in mind this project is going to take you a month or two. How much is that market going to change in that month or two? So someone needs to be able to tell you all of that.
So for the people out there today, and say I'm a home seller, could you tell me what like the top 5 things you recommend clients do on average? I know not every home is a little bit different, but homes have more similarities than differences. What are the top 5 things you think each home seller should do prior to selling their home to make sure they can sell it for the most in the least amount of time?
Okay. Well, the top 3 non-negotiables, and I'll add the 2 to make your top 5, but non-negotiables is cleaning, taking out junk, decluttering as much as possible, and depersonalizing. Depersonalizing, very common things, right? But take down anything that doesn't allow the people who walk through the door to imagine themselves in the home, right? So anything that you have a ton of pictures of families in baseball, well, they may not have a family or whatever it is that, they come in and they want to be able to picture themselves in here. Lots of other personalization things that we go through. Decluttering, I mean, it is the most important thing to me. Absolutely. When people do not have the ability to look past a clutter, a mess. So that is number 1. Cleaning is also extremely important, way up there with it. But Taking that mess out is probably even more important. There may be some people who say, well, they're dirty, but I can clean that. I can handle it. Don't be dirty either. But the point is that you could
Right.
definitely, go through that. The 4 and 5, I would say, is maybe to take care of some of the mechanicals. I mean, if your furnace is extremely old or not working, or, whatever the case may be, those are the questions that I get asked primarily from other agents. How old is the furnace? How old is the AC? How old's the water heater? How old's the roof? And how old's the windows, right? So those primary questions that you get asked, those are the ones that's probably at the very least my number 4 to fix, right? Really number 4 and number 5, mechanicals, and then roof and windows, kind of stick with those things. Paint obviously is way up there as well, but we could go into in depth about specific remodeling projects. But really, when you kind of get into those things, the cost goes up. It's prohibitive. So big
Well,
things.
I like those. I like that list because I think it gives the home seller or any home seller, hey, here's the core thing. Here's the baseline I got to do. There may be other things that you can do. Maybe some worn out traffic pattern carpets if you have that. Clearly, anybody can say that might be a lot of money to some people or not so much to another. But keep in mind, you're likely to get that return on investment very quickly. And I think that's things that people need to really evaluate, and that's, I think, an experienced broker like yourself is going to be able to provide that.
Absolutely.
I think that's very, very important. When we look at the other items that may make up part of the seller's offer to buyers, one of the things that we see often is seller will offer a home warranty paid for to the buyer. Do you see that or recommend that to some of your sellers?
Yeah, I mean, not terribly often, but it is an extremely good tool because it's low cost.
Mm-hmm.
And if you sell it properly, then, it does build confidence in the buyers. So, for example, when I mentioned to you the mechanicals, right? So you say these things are quite old, but they're in perfect working order. So your way to give a really good rebuttal is, I have this home warranty that maybe cost me $600-700, whatever amount it is for that 1 year's time, or however much you decide. But hey, if anything it's working, it's good. You don't need to worry about it. But if anything happens, then I bought you this just in case. So it does build a little bit of confidence for sure. And I think it's kind of dependent, again, on the market. When we're having this wonderful seller's market, for the last few years where we're in multiple offer situations and bidding wars, you don't see a lot of home warranties out there.
Right. Mm-hmm.
You just don't need them.
But another tool at the disposal of the seller that you could or could not recommend. Again, market conditions can drive a lot of things that
Drives
we do.
a lot of things. Yeah.
I think that's important to keep in mind, and that's good advice as well. Other key things that are popping in my head right now are when we look at seller concessions or things that sellers can do, because not all homes are in great condition. Not all homes are in that prime zone of where 80% of the people that can afford and buy a home right now are in. We see this often, or more often, I would say, in high value homes. Homes 7, 950, 10 million up, where they're looking at that may be a home buyer who wants to purchase that home, but they're concerned about interest rates. They're concerned that I can't get a jumbo loan below 7%. What kind of creative ways can sellers help reduce the amount of time on the market for the high-end homes, $1 million plus homes, let's say? What do you recommend to high-end home sellers to help that attract more buyers?
Yeah.
And using some other tools that you might recommend.
Yeah, no, very good question. Well, first of all, obviously I represent buyers as well. And I think if a number of agents would remind them that they're marrying the house and they're dating the rate, it is a big, we kind of have to work together with our fellow agents and being able to really tell our people that, like, rates are going to fluctuate, they're going to change, but you're not tied to them forever. There is refinancing options. And again, that's when you have a good team and you're working with other lenders. But as far as seller ability to do certain things, first of all, your agent should be able to work with different lenders and loan officers who maybe have some special programs that you could use in your marketing, right? Something that kind of helps them. But also ask your sellers to find out if your mortgage can be assumed. There is that. A mortgage assumption is not necessarily very common, maybe in VA loans and some other situations, but I've had a few recently that they had a 2.7%, whatever it
Mhm.
is, and they still owed, a certain amount on there. So the difference between a assumed mortgages is that buyer has to come up with that cash difference of what they're offering for it, right? So it doesn't always work out
Not a
because
fit for all buyers, for
it's
certain.
not a fit
Right.
for everybody, right? But it is a really good tool. I will ask every single one of my sellers, do you know if your mortgage is assumable? And here's why. Let's find out, just in case, even if it is just a
Right.
marketing tool,
Well,
right?
that's ammo you need to know
Yeah.
when you're talking to that buyer's agent. Oh, so this is an assumable mortgage. Here's the rough numbers. If you want to let your buyer know if that might be a fit for them,
Absolutely.
they may be able to get the deal of their lifetime right now. As you're going out, and the challenges is that to condition the mind to where you're being asked
Right.
questions, and
Right.
live questions where you're coming back with. I had a seller last week
Yeah.
ask me this
Another
question.
tool, I
and it was
mean,
such
obviously,
a
if
good
it's a
question, I
buyer's
wanted to bring
market,
it
then
back
another tool
and
to
share that
advise
with
your
everyone.
sellers,
And here's the
especially, is
question.
to maybe offer
And
some
this was my
credits, some
response. And 'cause
concessions.
we're going
And this has to go along
beyond
with the
question
limit
and
of
answer.
credits that we
We're
can
going
offer,
into
obviously.
scenarios
But
or storytelling. And
maybe
once
there's
we
a
do
certain
that,
number
it
of
kind of
credits to buy
elevates
down the points, to buy down the
content
interest rate,
to a
buy
great
points.
level.
So, yeah, I mean, there's lots of different ways that you could do it
So
to
we'll give
make
that
it
a
a
try.
little bit more exciting to the buyers.
Okay. So I want to thank Nancy Abuali. Thank you again for coming on the show today and sharing your knowledge and your information. Everybody, please click on the QR code, which is right after I'm done speaking, to reach out to Nancy, get her information, and ask her any question you have, whether you're looking to buy or looking to sell real estate in our marketplace. Thanks again.
Thank you. It was sincerely my pleasure. Definitely enjoy talking to you, Ken.
You as well, Nancy.
Thank you.
Bye.